Dr. Jones is an assistant professor in the counseling program in the psych department at Virginia Commonwealth University. And before he relocated to Richmond, Dr. Jones was a National Science Foundation SBE postdoctoral fellow at the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education. He received his doctorate in clinical psychology with an emphasis on children and families from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And he was a child's clinical psychology intern at UCLA. Dr. Jones also holds a Master's of Health Science and Mental Health from Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health, and his bachelor's degree in psychology from Duke University. Dr. Jones's program of research focuses on the psychosocial well-being of Black youth and their families. As an instructor of both undergraduate and graduate courses, he's committed to innovative, culturally responsive teaching that challenges learners to be co-owners in their pedagogical experiences and producers as well as consumers of knowledge. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jones.
Thank you so much, Sue, for that very gracious introduction. And thank you all so much. I see the responses in the chat. And I love that because I'm hoping that we can carry that energy throughout our morning session this morning. So welcome everybody. I'm really excited. I'm going to go ahead and kind of get the deck set up. I'm hoping folks can see that if you can maybe use those same reaction buttons to give me some sort of indication that you all can kind of see the intro slide that we have up there. I just want to make sure we're good before we get going too far. Great. Thank you so much for that confirmation. So welcome everybody and to a two-part discussion on infusing diversity and some other things we'll talk about in your introduction to psychology courses. So again, my name is Sean Jones. Today's purposes, Sean is just fine. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I will be happy as we are engaging if folks take themselves off mute. If folks would like to also share their pronouns as relevant, that'll be great throughout this morning as well. So just to give us a little bit of a flow, I'm going to start with just some quick session agreements that I would like for us to kind of hold for this two-part time together, say a little bit about who I am and why it's an honor to be facilitating. And then we're going to spend some time over the next 50 to 55 minutes kind of talking about parts 2 and 3 on the table of contents. So thinking about the what, when we're talking about diversity and as it relates to intro to psychology, what are we talking about? And why? Why is it imperative for us to infuse diversity into our IP classes? I will do a little bit of an alley-oop primer to the how, but that'll really be what the second session after our 30-minute break is really going to kind of be devoted to some of those nuts and bolts, if that sounds good. So started off with just some quick session agreements. And you may say, well, I've attended other CDI things these last couple of weeks, and I don't know if we had these agreements. Well, that may be true. And that is no aspersions to any other presenter, but particularly what I find when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, sometimes it can get sticky and it can not be everyone's kind of favorite cup of tea, because many of us are at different points and different places on our journey of understanding various terms and pedagogical approaches and how do we infuse these things. So I'm asking us if we would all as community today agree to the following. So first, I'm going to have a couple of breakout sessions, one that I'm going to really ask you to engage in courageous conversation. You may in that context be sharing something or heard something shared that you really would love it if it didn't go, beyond, that conversation or the discourse that we have in community. So I'm asking us that we all respect that, while of course taking away the nuggets that we learn from one another here today, that we'll do our best to listen carefully to one another, keeping an open mind and being open to learning. And then inclusive of myself, but for all of us, to try to not be disrespectful of our fellow attendees, even if we don't respect their views, even if we think that's hogwash. Can we disagree respectfully? So I'm opening up to my panel view. So if folks feel good with that, you can let me know with some sort of indication. If those agreements don't feel good for you, let me, I welcome you to ask a quick question about that. But we're really wanting to create a brave space here. In order to do that, these agreements, I think, will really help us. So I'm loving seeing the thumbs up. I appreciate you all rocking with me in that regard. All right, so let's give this thing a little bit of a spin. So quickly, a little bit about why I'm facilitating this session. At the end of the day, any of those different various things in my bio aside, I come to you all in community today as someone who is really passionate about teaching IP. I'll unfold that over our time in these sessions today. But given my own social identities and social location, given my own educational experiences and how I came to where I'm at today, I recognize how foundational IP was for me to show up the way I am today as a first-gen Black male student at Duke University those years ago, right? I am also, given my research and my just personal identity and ethos, I am passionate about D, E, and I, as well as social justice. So some folks know JEDI, JEDI, very passionate about that, right? I have, this is going on number 10. I have 10, not years, but 10 semesters of teaching the IP course at VCU, being one of the instructors between fall, spring, and summer, teaching that face-to-face, hybrid, virtually, pre and post, the pandemic mandates, etc. So I'm really coming to this, and I hope in ways that will help contribute to our discussion. I really see IP as I share with my students, this idea, this challenge that I take up each semester of trying to get students to learn to love psychology, or at least to learn something about psychology. And I think that even right away calls for us to really quickly think about what does it mean to infuse diversity. So we'll pick that theme up throughout our time today. Despite that bit of background, I want to recognize, and it's so important to recognize, that I stand figuratively on the shoulders of those before me who have and are continuing to address these topics. Many of them are women and in our field. Many of them are Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our field, and many of them live in those intersections, right? And so I want to make sure that I acknowledge that, and will continue to acknowledge that today. And I also want to say that I do not purport to be an expert on all things DEI. And I hope by the end of our first hour to disabuse any of us of feeling like we need to be the expert on all things DEI, because I think that sets us all up collectively and individually for heartache and pain, right? So what does that mean? I'm going to tell you like I tell folks in my class. If I don't know something, if y'all ask a question and I don't know it, I will tell you I don't know it, but we'll do our best to learn together. I know that folks are coming in, and we're going to see where folks are at in just a moment here with a bevy of experience. And we're going to hear that. This is not for me to hog this space. I want to hear how folks are navigating the successes and the stresses of trying to do this important work. Okay. So, this may be a little bit random, but I build my IP class off of the critically acclaimed show, How to Get Away with Murder. So that is the cast of How to Get Away with Murder, which is a longtime show on ABC, for those who are not familiar. And so who are we in the space today? I've seen a lot of greetings from sunny different places, and I love that. One of the things that I think will be relevant for our discourse today is if we can engage in the first of a series of kind of questions together in community. So the first question I'm just going to simply ask is for folks to indicate your experience teaching IP, if you could quickly. Now, you may be saying, Sean, how am I going to do this? If you take your handy dandy smartphone, you can open up the camera app, point it at that QR code, and it'll take you right into this particular multiple choice poll here. If what I just said there is too complex or doesn't make sense, you're welcome to go into any browser on your phone or your personal device, type in slido.com, slido.com, and it's going to ask you for a code, a session code, and you can put in IPI-DEI. And I can see that already 24 and counting of you all have gotten it. Educators Unite, they're coming in. So I love that. We'll give it just a little minute here for folks who may still be ramping up, to give folks an opportunity so we can really get a sense of who we have in the virtual space this morning. So excited to see over 80 of us sharing this space right now. And over half of you have already kind of indicated where you're at in terms of your experience with teaching intro psych. So again, I'll give this about another 30 or 45 seconds. And once I click in, you can still continue to endorse where you fall for you. But I want to make sure I stick our landing before our first break. Okay, so feel free to keep endorsing if you haven't had the opportunity to do so already. Right. So recognizing that we're at about 50%, a little bit higher than 50% of our participants here, I'm going to go ahead and indicate where we're at. So it's great to see, right? So a majority of folks here, at least that have indicated, and again, please continue to endorse as you are desiring to do so. About 40% of folks right here have been teaching IP for 10 years or more, right? What I want us to all see is the second highest proportion at the moment is folks who have no experience. So 20% or so, just under 20% of us here have no experience teaching intro psych. So that are, think about what we would be saying if we were in our section talking about our kind of descriptive statistics, right? So we have an interesting distribution of experience here. And so that's great because it means that we can really kind of co-learn together. We have folks who have been teaching IP longer than I have, and everywhere in between. So we love to see that. And I think it'll really kind of help inform where we're at. And really, I'm going to definitely call in on the wealth of experience that folks have, given what I'm seeing here. All right. So our next way of kind of seeing who's in the building is going to be more of a word cloud exercise, really big on these. So if you're already in the session, you should be good to answer this next one. But the next question is going to be a word cloud format and just ask you to just jot down, and you can enter in more than one word. You can enter in multiple entries. But when you think about diversity, right? When you think about diversity, what are the words or phrases that come to mind when you think about diversity? And not necessarily diversity in teaching, so necessarily, but diversity writ large. What words or phrases come to mind? Welcome to those who are joining still. We are currently doing a word cloud exercise where we're asking folks to jot down what words or phrases come to mind. And actually, we have one of our participants here who also utilized the chat function, which I will say is also certainly a viable option. So great. Yep. So if it works out for you to not deal with the Slido word cloud, I also invite you to throw things into the chat box as well. Okay. So let's I'm going to expose our word cloud and see what we're kind of seeing, and also pull in kind of what we're getting from those of you all who are electing to use the chat function at this time. Okay, love a word cloud. So love to sit back and see what we're seeing with a word cloud. So I'm going to kind of talk through this in real time because these are your real responses. One of the things I love about doing them in real time. So the first thing that my eyes are drawn to, and this may be different for those of you all on this call, is equity, actually. So equity is so interesting, and inclusion right beneath that. And I think that'll be really exciting in a moment when we talk a little bit about the what, when we're talking about diversity and IP. So I see equity, I see inclusion, I see race and gender as relatively, and ethnicity as relatively bigger buckets that are meaning that, you know, a couple of us are out there probably endorsing. So we'll talk about that a bit. I see intersectionality as a pretty big one that is jumping up. And I'm also going to call out some other things that I'm seeing. Some phrases: a rising tide lifts all boats. I love that. I love that phrase, which I don't see anymore. That was just there, but that was awesome. I see welcoming all. I see a couple of things about valuing experiences, unique experiences, wanting everyone at the table. I see some pedagogical phrases like universal design, right? I see belonging. So there's a lot. I see us. There's a lot of stuff here, right, that is coming to our fore. So I love this. I'm actually going to screenshot that so I can hopefully keep that for posterity, because I think it'll be really awesome. Okay, so let's develop. Let's develop what we are talking about when we're talking about diversity in Intro to Psychology. And to do that, I'm going to call over the next couple of slides on a series of definitions that come from different spaces and places. So the first, of course, is thinking about APA's most recent definition of diversity, right? So quickly: involving the representation or compensation of various social identity groups and a work group, organization, community. The focus is on social identities that correspond to societal differences in power, privilege, and thus marginalization of some groups based on certain attributes. What we see there are some of the attributes that we just endorsed in that word cloud, right? So we see race, ethnicity, culture, gender identity and expression, et cetera, and so forth, right? We also see things that maybe we didn't see on the screen. So ability, disability, see spirituality, age, right? Immigration status, language, right? And this idea, love this last part, right? There's a recognition that people have multiple identities and that social identities are intersectional. We saw that word, intersectionality, and have different salience and impact in different contexts. Okay, great. So this is APA's definition of diversity. It is, I think, by design, a mouthful. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that it, to me, what jumps out in this definition is the import of the multiple ways in which we can think about what it means to think about diversity or being diverse. And someone in the chat, right, said a variety of experiences. And that is really summed up somewhat here in these various social identity categories that we see here. So I like to make it local. I like to make it real. So I'm actually going to, you know, with the permission granted to me as a faculty member, gonna show you what I utilize to inform how I think about diversity as it pertains to teaching Intro to Psychology. And to do that, I'm going to do what I encourage many folks here, I've encouraged you all to do, which is to find your, if you don't already know, engage in an exercise wherein you find your institutions. If you're a part of a college or school, if you're a part of the department or program, at every level that you can, I deeply encourage folks to find the ways in which your institutions, departments, et cetera, are talking about and publicly projecting, right, outward facing, what their definition of diversity means. Why is that important? Well, we'll see in a second, right, that may vary greatly by where we are, by where folks are in terms of kind of working through thinking about what diversity means. We also see that it really can kind of speak to who the institution is serving, whom the institution is serving, where the institution is located, all of those various kind of contextual features that we just saw at the end of the APA definition. So in my college, I'm part of the College of Humanities and Sciences. That's where intro psych is housed. That's where a number of our majors, even outside of psychology, have to take intro to psychology as a requirement within the college. Here is the definition that we see here. So interesting, diversity refers to practices that involve understanding and appreciating the qualities and experiences of those who differ from us, right? And diversity recognizes that systematic discrimination creates and maintains privileges for some and disadvantages for others, right? So one of the things that I noticed, you know, when I compare kind of APA as an organization or an entity and I compare our college, is that the first sentence is what diversity not just is, as in what makes up who is diverse, but here the college is at least speaking to what diversity seeks to do, right? Or what it is comprised of, which is practices anchored at understanding and appreciation. Understanding, appreciation, and recognition. Okay, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that when we talk about the how piece towards the end of this hour, and certainly in the second session, we'll talk about what that looks like, right? So the second part, I won't read in the interest of time, but again, we do see a call to those social identity markers. So one of the things I really love actually about my department is that department actually in some ways before my college had their own definition of diversity. And so this is our departmental definition, which is super relevant to me as someone within the department who is teaching a course offered in our department per se. And so I want to have you all read the Department of Psychology statement and background. And I want, whether it's in the chat or if folks want to unmute and say, is there anything that you notice in this Department of Psych definition that is different than what maybe you saw show up for either the APA or my college's definition of diversity? Okay, focuses on contributions. Love that. What else are folks seeing there or noticing in the definition that's a little bit different? Intersectionality is missing. Yep. Okay. Yep. I see a couple of folks. I invite folks to scroll a little bit in the chat and pick up what I'm seeing as well, which is that one of the things that I think is really striking and telling here is that in addition to several social identity versions of diversity, we also see this last part that says ideas, perspectives, and values, which a number of you said. It allows for diversity and thought. And that, I think, is both the beauty and the challenge. Absolutely, Taryn, I agree. Lookism and sizeism, so physical appearance, I love that, right? One of the, I think, beauties and challenges of thinking about diversity in course instruction is is the definition, right? Depending on what we mean, right? We can, our classrooms, oftentimes for many folks, I didn't get a sense of what sorts of institutions you're at, but for many folks, a course that might have large offerings of learners, of students, is going to have so many different types of diversity at once. So certainly those social identity markers, certainly the intersections of those intersecting identities, attention to intersectionality, and also ideas, perspectives, and values, right? I teach at a large state institution that is in the capital of the state, but also in the former capital of the Confederacy. And so what does diversity mean when I stand up on day one in front of 300 learners who are all the colors of the rainbow, or are in different statuses of ability, ... and also are coming with things that I can see, things that I can't see, and values, perspectives, and ideas that I won't know until they share them, if they ever do. And so that really, I think, aligns nicely with some language that comes out of the draft guidelines for our APA psych major, right? This idea that our science should support diversity of ideas and freedom of expression, right? And really kind of building from a Sanford Faculty Senate Committee on Diversity, and talking about this idea of diversity of thought, diversity of ideas. So as we're trekking along together today, I want us to think about, okay, well, this is diversity of the different folks who are in the space with me, in community with me, you know, as an instructor, with regard to those big 9 plus XYZ, however many social identity characteristics, but also this idea of that these folks are in different stages and places of their ideas, of their expression, of their identities, in a multitude of ways that also speak to what we define as diversity. It can't be either or, would be my argument. We can't just focus on, well, I set up an environment that is diverse in thought and don't pay attention to folks' lived social and cultural identities and realities, but it also may not behoove us to just focus on social identities to the exclusion of diversity of thought, ideas, perspectives. Okay, so trucking with me, I want to keep going quickly, and I'm not, in the interest of time, going to drill down on each of these additional definitions. But again, I was called to talk about infusing diversity, but I really, and I explained this to folks as we were talking about setting up these sessions, it really is difficult. And you all's word cloud so beautifully illustrated this. It is really difficult to talk about infusing diversity without talking about diversity's colleagues, siblings, whatever you would like to call them, equity and inclusion, right? And so, although the title of this talk today, or this discussion today, is really focused on diversity per se, I want us to consider the notions of equity and inclusion. So inclusion is just quickly providing equal access to opportunity, who's at the table, and equity, I think at this point, many of us have, and if you haven't, I'm happy to find the graphic during the break of the difference between equality and equity. And it's often these like people who are looking over at a baseball game. That's what, not if you know what I'm talking about in terms of that depiction of this idea of thinking about justice, about equal outcomes, but also equitable distribution of outcomes that may not always equate to treating everyone 100% the same, because we recognize that may actually, while being equal, may not be equitable. Okay, so we'll unpack that as well. So I'm going to break up the monotony here and ask us to do a quick self-survey. And it's this. On a 10-point scale, with 1 being Sean, I have no confidence. And 10 being, I'm here to really support, and I can, do this DEI thing in IP classes in my sleep. How confident do you feel about infusing diversity, equity, and inclusion into IP classes? And again, I invite folks to endorse their responses using this method. One thing about this is it is de-identified. If you don't mind your community and colleagues know how you feel about your confidence, I also invite you, if you wish, if you want to drop your number in the chat, rather, we're open to that as well. Okay. Okay. So let's see where we're at. Love a little data. Love Slido because it gives us a nice little average, but also this distribution here. Okay. So I want you all to take in what I'm taking in, right? And just quickly kind of seeing that thanks so much, Eric. For a number of us, right, we are feeling right somewhere in between, a 4 and an 8, with kind of 6 and 7, with 7 right now kind of being what we endorse the most. So I love that for this group. I'm really excited to hear and see that for this group. So I think that's really, really great. So I'm gonna go on to the next slide here. So given that, given that folks are, of course, in lots of places, but generally folks are feeling pretty good. I love a strengths-based perspective. I love to start from strength. So what I'd like to do, take a few moments, either in the chat or please, again, I love to hear folks' voices. You are welcome to take yourself off mute as well if you want to raise your hand. But I'm going to hold a couple of moments for us just to share what are 1 or 2 things that you're already doing or that you already plan to do before you came into space today to infuse diversity into your IP classes. And thank you also for sharing that up as well, Taryn, and those. So again, share 1 or 2 things that you're already doing or plan to do to infuse diversity into your IP classes. If we have any volunteers, you can use the raise hand feature. Also welcome to throw something in the chat.
Hi, this is Dr. Campbell Mahalia. So I don't know how to, I just got finished exercising, so I'm not going to put the camera on. So I'm doing multitasks with this. But at the beginning, you just showed that you use the how I got away with murder.
Yes.
And I've been looking at this series and I've been watching it. It's called All American.
Yes.
So with that, it has so much of different cultures. It has so much of different diversity in it. It brings a genre of everything: economics, race, gender, different cultures. And for me, what I want to do is create that same kind of atmosphere this series talks about, to let students know that in a way we're no different. We all maybe look different, but at the end of the day, we're that. So how would I bring that in? I don't know yet. I'm trying to figure it out. But I would like to bring that kind of energy to introduction to psychology, because it's really to me, psychology is about finding who we are, asking those questions, who, what, and how. And with that series, I think the students will get to see that. And that's what I want to bring in to answer the question more of cultures, understanding people culture and the perception that we all view, that sometimes perceptions is not as real as we think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Campbell, for sharing. I'm loving what folks are dropping. So I'm going to elevate a couple of these, and I may not get to all of them, but I encourage you to please see what your peers in the community are posting here. And we're going to definitely get to these in our time today. But to Dr. Campbell's point about the who and the how, right? Even this setup, right? So I love what Dimitri puts here, right? Who are your people? Where did they come from? What have they been doing, right? Another reference to a show, Miss Marvel, which is, yeah, super, super dope. Pakistani, Muslim, American teen superhero. Awesome, awesome, right? And then we see a number of also different kind of design things that folks are doing as well. So we're gonna hold these, and hopefully we'll get a chance. Maybe I didn't ask for this in advance, but maybe we can save some of this to be useful. But I will touch on a lot of these as well. But I'm really happy to kind of hear where we're starting at. So I want to talk just a little bit, very, very quickly, about the why. And I think for a lot of us here, I'm going to breeze a bit because I think a lot of us understand the why, kind of given how folks are engaging, but I don't want to take for granted that everyone does not, right? So first of all, what do we know about the infusion of EDI in pedagogy, generally speaking? So we generally know that it's associated with favorable academic outcomes, not only grade at the end of class, but also persistence, motivation, and those related outcomes. We also know that it's associated with, importantly, an increased sense of belonging, which is something that always jumps out to my heart, again, because, again, I know that we teach in different settings. For me, when I walk into a classroom of 300, it is so easy for a variety of reasons. About 30 some odd, almost 40% of students at VCU are first gen. So it's for a variety of reasons, it is very likely or possible that I walk in and folks do not necessarily feel that they belong or that they have community and place and space. And so thinking about how we infuse this carefully is really critical to that. And then we also know that when different approaches to our course elements are included, that we see an increased awareness among learners of things like power, privilege, and marginalization, which were discussed in the initial APA definition, as well as increased social action, right? And that'll be relevant in a second here. So turning next to APA's EDI statements. So why else does this matter? Well, because again, with regard to APA as an entity, as an organization, we are really thinking about, right, what does it mean to be accessible, equitable, inclusive, right, and have dignity for all, right? And so this is from the EDI statements. Those are great. We also recognize, right, and I will speak again, me and my identities, that I was very encouraged to see the apology that came out last year from the APA, as well as the policies that came out from the APA, the policy statement that really focused on the role of our field of psychology and the APA per se in dismantling racism against people of color in the US. And so among the numerous kind of resolutions that were outlined were many that were related to education. So things like teaching the history of racism in the United States, understanding kind of critically identity and community, right? And this idea of kind of building up to a more, again, just future. When we turn to our APA psychology major guidelines, we again see this. If we look at our current operating version, version 2.0, right? Sorry that this doesn't appear the best. I apologize. But if we look at goal 3, and particularly at goal 3.3, this idea of adopting values that build community, which we've been talking about this morning, there's this idea written here, right, that new students should recognize how diversity deriving from both individual and intersectional differences can enrich human experience, right? If we look at the draft of version 3.0, we see that that goal is being considered now maybe as this idea of values and psychological science, right? And this notion here from that document that students should begin with a fundamental basis for understanding EDI, which occurs in introductory psychology courses, right? And then, of course, to add to that, we have the IPI, student learning outcomes, which you all who have been a part of the CDI have seen by now multiple times. And among our key themes is key theme D, which I want to highlight, which is that psychology values diversity, promotes equity, and fosters inclusion in pursuit of a more just society. Okay. So when I think about everything that I just shared there, as an instructor of intro psych, I think about the image of Atlas, right? I think about what I just read from the draft of the 3.0 guidelines, that this foundational understanding of our learners in EDI should come in introduction to psychology. So I know that prior to this coming to this institute, that most folks say there's a lot of stuff to cover. I don't know how I feel how I can cover all of this. Some of this stuff, I don't feel like I have a great, expertise around. And now we're coming here and talking about how critical it is for not only the discipline, but also for our learners and the broader society to infuse this stuff in IP. So I want to acknowledge that is a lot. That it can be a lot to be asked to do. Now, that's not to say that I disagree with that at all, but I do want to acknowledge that can be a lot to consider. And I want to invite us actually, as we get ready to kind of close out part 1, to actually engage a moment of mindful reflection, right? So I'm going to ask us to engage a moment of mindfulness. And I'm going to introduce to us quickly a strategy that comes from some of my dear colleagues at the Racial Empowerment Collaborative at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Howard Stevenson, if you've heard, is the director. And so what I'm going to introduce quickly and have us do to kind of close out our time for the first hour is I want us to engage in a brief mindfulness exercise known as CLCBE. Now, you may be saying, Sean, why are we breaking this up to talk about being mindful? Because when we consider teaching about and using diversity, that can be stressful. We're called to do it. We see the imperative of doing it, and that does not nullify or negate the reality that it can be a stressful proposition. And so it's important to connect with yourself about how this stress may show up for you. And so to do that, I thought I would introduce this idea or this notion of CLCBE: calculate, locate, communicate, breathe, and exhale. Okay, truck with me here for a couple minutes, and then we're going to practice this before we close out for the first hour. So CLCBE, the first thing that I want us to do, right? This is useful for a number of stressful events. Oftentimes when we're thinking about talking around differences, we know that talking around difference, talking about race, talking about culture, talking about gender expression, identity, etc., can be stressful, right? So it's important for us to tap in, to calculate how we are feeling either when we're in moments, whether we're in that class and we get called in or called out by a learner, whether someone asks us a question, like I said, and we don't know and we stumble, it's important to calculate how we're feeling in moments like that, either anticipatory or in the moment. And to not only calculate those, but in the same way that you said how confident you were, to rate those feelings in terms of their intensity on a scale from 1 to 10. So 1 being, hey, this feeling that I'm feeling is at a kind of low level, to 10 being like, this is super overwhelming. It is getting in the way of my ability to really kind of do the work. Okay. So we want to calculate. The second thing that we want to do, and we're going to practice before we get into the how and the nitty gritty, is I want to locate where you are feeling any tension that you came in here with regard to this topic, any uncertainty that you're feeling. Where is that located? Where is it located like Atlas, that it feels like we're dropping the weight of this important thing on your proverbial shoulders as instructors? And getting really specific with that. Where do we feel it in our body? And then an important part, the second C of CLCBE, is to communicate self-talk. So what am I hearing myself say? Why is this important? I'm out of my depth. I'm stepping in it. I'm steeped in white privilege. These students don't respect me because I'm Black. What am I hearing, right, in my own head when I'm thinking about the prospect of engaging around diversity in my coursework? And then the last part of CLCBE is to practice breathing and exhaling. So oftentimes, and I hope we're all doing it, I know that Dr. Campbell said they're coming back from exercising. So hopefully we had some good respiration, but for all of us, I want to invite us to recognize that as we think about trying to do the important work that being an instructor of IP cause, right, before we even think about DE&I issues, is a Herculean task. And sometimes we can be on autopilot and forget to take a moment to tap in and check in. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have us engage in a breakout discussion, and we're going to do that in pairs if we can. In pairs, we're going to have a conversation where we're going to reflect, and then we're going to share a story. And I'm going to ask you, as you're sharing a story, to try yourself to jot down what you're feeling, where you're feeling it, what you're hearing yourself say. And then I want you to make sure after you finish sharing your story that you make sure that you breathe. Okay? Deep inhale, deep exhale. All right. So what are the stories that I want us to tell? So I'm going to give you an option. It's always good to have options, right? So I'm going to invite you to either recall a difficult time where you felt out of your depth, for example, when it came to skillfully discussing topics of diversity in your IP class, or in another class for the 20% of you all who have not taught IP yet. That's one option. Or you can imagine an anticipated diversity-related moment with a student in an IP class that would be stressful for you. And by stressful, I mean like on a scale of 1 to 10, it'd be a 7 or higher. Okay. So either recall a difficult time or imagine an anticipated diversity-related moment. And you know what, actually, as I'm looking at our time and where we're at, Sue, I think I'm going to actually just have us reflect and share out collectively, and we'll do some group work in the second half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a timer for just 1 minute. So I want you to just spend 1 minute reflecting on your story, either one of those, okay? And that time for you can start right about now.